Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. Joining us today is Maria from Sage Intacct. Maria will be demoing the solution. I am Mo, and on the webinar today we have Faye from Pur-Logic Solutions and Angela also from Pur-Logic Solutions, who will be keeping track of our Q&A. A bit of housekeeping rules. We are recording this webinar and we will share it with you after the webinar. Please ask your questions at the end or in the chat box and we'll do our best to answer your questions. And at the end of the demo, and if we can't, we will follow it up with more details. Your time is valuable and we will do our best to stick to the time allotted to our webinar today. So Sage Intacct. Sage Intacct is the top provider of cloud financial applications to nonprofit organizations. And I just wanted to mention that this is the second presentation that we have done for nonprofit organization. The first was introductory and it also included a live demo. This one will also include a live demo, but it will go in depth and we will cover the demo agenda towards this presentation. Sage Intacct is a best-in-class cloud accounting solution. It allows you to build your unique solution that is best for your organization. Sage Intacct focuses on delivering the best financial management solution for the finance professionals. Outside of the core financials, we have additional applications available so that as your business grows and your business needs change, the product grows with it, specializing in helping non-for-profits of all types, including charities, memberships, associations, foundations, and faith-based organizations. Sage Intacct streamlines grant, fund, project, and donor accounting while delivering a real-time visibility into the metrics of that matter, which you will see on the demo. We have also a native integrations with other technology partners. As you see on the screen, we have just put few of them. There is over 100 and more gets added every single day. And we do guarantee the integration with those third-party solutions, and there are never any disruptions with the ISVs. ISVs refer to independent software vendors. So once you do the integrations to these third-party applications, all the reporting will show up and be within your Sage Intacct and available to display on a dashboard. You can report out of there and your requirements will be met in there. As you can see, the dashboard here shows multiple third-party applications showing up within Sage Intacct. So let's talk about your industry and some of the key areas of frustration for most non-for-profits. As you can see, we've just listed 4 of them that you can identify with. As you can see that, the lack of real-time visibility into key metrics and budgets tells a lot about lack of transparency as being the key to telling your financial story. Many nonprofit finance leaders face many challenges achieving transparency. Besides the lack of real-time visibility, you have manual time-consuming reporting. You cannot slice and dice your data. Lack of integration to third-party applications, which most non-for-profits do have for their donor management. And then you have a bit of a complex and slow and error-prone manual work and spreadsheets. And you can see that in most non-for-profit organizations. So what can Sage Intacct do for you? Sage Intacct has been helped thousands of nonprofits overcome these challenges. No matter where you fall on that spectrum, being compliant and adjusting for change requires both a plan and the right solution. We have solved some of the biggest nonprofit accounting challenges in our platform, all while we provide comprehensive dashboards and reporting so you can be as transparent as possible to your funders, to your board, and to your community. You could increase in need and demand for services and focus more on data. You can stay compliant with compliance requirements, and you can now free up some of your resources to do other things. Sage Intacct also has many for not-for-profit clients, from foundations to community groups, as we mentioned. On the screen, you'll see a typical profile for not-for-profit. Whether you're starting out or you're a mature organization, Sage Intacct will be able to work for you. And as you can see, some of these charities here are based in Canada, and we'll also show you other charities around North America. How does Sage Intacct provide a return on your investment in the software? You can accelerate your monthly close at least by 40% and budgeting cycle by 30%. You can redeploy staff to do more productive tasks. The monthly close has been slashed for many Sage Intacct users, whether in the non-for-profit or for-profit, by 75%. 75%, and you can avoid about 60 hours of manually on consolidating information and reporting it that you might be doing on Excel today. And the board reporting is cut from 1 hour to a few minutes, as all the reports are available. Improved budget accuracy, because budgeting comes part of the application. You can reduce the financial statement work from 20 hours to minutes, cut month-end reporting in half, as we talked about. And the application is cloud-based, so it modernizes your time-consuming financial process. Here are some of the examples of actual not-for-profit organizations that Sage Intacct was able to help. You can see that some of them achieved 400% return on investment. Some of them improved their cash flow by $500,000. So this is an actual return on investment for many of the people who have chosen to use Sage Intacct. I am going to now pass it on to Maria, and she is going to discuss the demo agenda and actually demo what she has put on the agenda.
Thank you so much, Mo.
You're welcome.
Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for confirming. Okay, so hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining the demo today. My name is Maria and I'm a solutions consultant with Sage Intacct. As Mo said, this is my second NFP webinar with Pur-Logic. So today's webinar will be focused on managing multiple funds or entities, something which Sage Intacct does natively. If you're interested in a general NFP overview of Sage Intacct, you can find the webinar on Pur-Logic's website. Here's the agenda for today. So we'll look at dashboards and dimensions, handling multiple funds or multiple entities, automating your inter-fund transactions, and transferring money between funds, producing compliant balance sheets by fund, including the presentation of due to, due from balances, consolidated financials, automating transaction allocations and restriction release. Then we'll take a look at the not-for-profit grants or projects module versus the dimension. And finally, I'll end with compliance and reporting. So you'll see how easy it is to gain visibility through dashboards and dynamic reporting, access your data in real time, handle multiple entities, automate your due to and due from balances, present consolidated financials, automate your transaction allocations and restriction release, manage grants or projects as funds, and produce compliant financial reports. So without further ado, let's get to the demo. I will change my screen. Okay, so you should be seeing my Sage Intacct screen now. Mo, if you can please confirm.
Yeah. Yes, we can see the dashboard.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you. All right. So I'm logged into my Sage Intacct not-for-profit demo company as Carla. So Carla is the controller and a business user with full admin rights. I'll preface this by saying that I'm going to demo from the top level of a multi-entity or multi-fund environment. So we can see here that I'm accessing the CFO's dashboard, which is a role-based dashboard. You have multiple out-of-the-box dashboards available to you, and you can also create and configure them to your needs. Dashboards can be locked down by entity or fund, by location, and by user. We have some incredible reporting tools for the dashboard that will allow you to build them. At the top here, we have a filter for the date. So let's take a look at year-end 2021. I am a year behind, but you get the idea here. So we see how the data updates instantly, and you can see now how the numbers have changed on my dashboard. Next to the date, we have filters for dimensions. So dimensions allow you to create complex and meaningful financial reports and dashboards with full capability and flexibility. They are not tied to any one natural account, so you have the ability to record transactions by any one or multiple of these dimensions. They improve visibility and eliminate the need for a linear chart of accounts with segments. It's also better from a reporting perspective because you can slice and dice the data by these dimensions and combinations of dimensions. The dimensions I've selected here are departments, funds or entities, and projects or grants. So let's say I want to take a look at one of my funds. I'm going to choose my general fund and hit apply. So instantly everything on the dashboard updates. We can also do combinations here. So let's say someone wants to analyze a specific department along with this fund. So we can go in, we can choose the department, hit apply, and it'll update. We can also do another combination. So let's say I want to take a look at my project or grant, or I want to analyze a dimension group. So I've grouped some of them, like event group, campaign group, active projects, etc. So I'll choose my campaign group and hit apply. So now we're looking at this combination. It may not apply to all the information on my dashboard, but I think you get the idea here. So whether you want to analyze one dimension, multiple dimensions, and dimension groups, you can slice and dice the data as you wish. Let me clear out some of these filters so we have some data on the dashboard. You can enable other dimensions as you'd like on your dashboard. So the filters that I've enabled on my dashboard are, as I mentioned, the departments, funds or entities, and projects or grants. But we can also enable other dimensions. So you can see here customer, vendor, employee, restrictions, which I'll be talking about in a moment, sites, items, etc. You can have any amount of dimensions, so we can also track any user-defined dimensions. There's no limit as to how many dimensions you can track. So from the top level on our dashboard, we can drill down for more detail since the dashboard is interactive. Let's say I want to drill down into my total expenditures, and I want to take a look at the increase in program fees compared to the 2020 year. So I'm going to drill down into the number, which takes me to my general ledger report. And from here, I can drill down further into the individual journal entry. So I'll go into this journal entry here. Okay, so now I can see the journal entry information, my tag dimensions, I can see my fund as well as my other dimensions, as well as a complete audit trail with date and time stamp. So you can see how from the top level, I was able to get further into the details for the journal. So I'd like you to think about how much more visibility you have in real time with Sage Intacct's dynamic dashboards. So fund accounting is native to Sage Intacct, and fund accounting definitions vary, with some organizations requiring the traditional fund accounting akin to governmental fund accounting, meaning fully independently balancing funds and the ability to produce compliant balance sheets by fund, including the presentation of due to, due from balances, as well as activity tracking from a revenue and expense perspective. So this is how my demo company is set up, and it's what I'll demo first. Other organizations simply mean the ability to account for funds from a revenue, expense, and residuals perspective, more of a net asset tracking approach. I'll show this later on when I discuss projects. Think about how your organization tracks funds. So as I mentioned in the beginning, I'm accessing Sage Intacct from the top level of a multi-entity or multi-fund environment. So Sage Intacct's multi-entity architecture allows you to access the individual entities or funds, work at the entity level, and then see how the organization is doing overall from the top level. So these entities or funds, in my case, roll up and consolidate into the top. If you have access to the top level, you use the top level of a multi-entity or multi-fund shared company to work with the shared data, such as accounts or departments. Think of it as a bird's eye view of all your entities or funds. So you can see that I'm accessing the organization from the top level, but I can slide into my other funds if my permissions allow it. So I'll go ahead and choose my general fund, and it opens in a new tab. Now I can work from this fund directly. I still have all my applications available and functionality, so I can work in this fund directly. You can also limit users to specific funds. So let's say somebody shouldn't be accessing the top level, or they should only be accessing one or two funds. You can restrict them. Let me go back to the top level. So now let's talk about the entity or fund setup. So with the multi-entity architecture, it makes it really easy to set up new entities or funds within minutes. You can simply add them here by clicking Add. So entities or funds are a dimension tracked by Sage Intacct. If an organization is practicing traditional fund accounting, this dimension is also naturally equipped to offer the reporting and accounting rules necessary to be compliant with fund accounting principles and balance sheet presentation standards. So we see the individual funds here in my sample company, and the information is configured for each one. So each fund is essentially set up as an independent entity to ensure that cross-entity transactions balance properly. I'll go in to view the general fund, or Fund 100. So we can see the information here. And in additional information, I've defined the customer and vendor for inter-entity billback. So we can also set up the relationships between the funds through inter-entity account mapping. So here we're able to see the inter-entity account mapping that's been set up for all funds, the relationships between them, all on one central page. So Sage Intacct can save time and reduce manual entry by automating your inter-entity transactions and easily transferring money between funds, providing you with an accurate representation of your due to and due from amounts. I'll go into my inter-entity reconciliation dashboard. So along the top, you'll notice that I have performance cards with my various due to and due from amounts across my different entities or funds, as well as intercompany revenue, which we can drill down into for further information, just as I showed you earlier. Again, you can see how this improves your visibility across the organization. On the left, I have entity 300 or fund 300's trial balance. You could do this for all entities or funds if you wanted to. On the right, I have top level bills that hit multiple funds. So let's go into one of them and we'll take a look at an example. So I'll open this up. So here we see a top level bill for Green Team Waste Management. So again, it's a top level bill for multiple funds with top level payment that creates automatic due to and due from entries. So each line references a different fund. We have a general and Colson initiative there. So Fund 100 and 200. And then we can enter this information into one transaction, which will save time for the end user. Now, if we take a look at the payment details, we can see that it actually was paid through the entity or Fund 300's account. So the defined interentity relationships drive the automation of due to and due from entries. Let's take a look at another example through a journal. So I'll go here into my journal entries and let's take a look at this example here. So here is a top level journal entry for multiple funds. Again, that creates automatic due to and due from entries because of the interentity account mapping. So in this example, we're able to see the entry information entered, right? So we see Fund 404 and 405 are due to Fund 100. Right? So again, due to our interentity account mapping, we're able to automate the interentity entries, which we can see below here, right? So we can see the due to and due from interentity entries below. We can also easily duplicate this entry. Again, you can edit any information in here, such as the posting date or amounts, and then go ahead and post it. So that will also help in terms of saving you time for journal entries, especially when you're entering them manually. So let's take a look at one final example. So this time it's an interentity bill back example. So from the top level, I'll go into my invoice. I'll create an invoice in accounts receivable. So when I showed you my fund setup, I had defined a customer and a vendor for each. So this will allow me to do bill backs. So I'll put the customer here as entity 100. And I'm able to pull my bill back template for interentity service fees. I'll enter an amount of $100. And this time I'm going to choose my fund as Fund 201 because I want it to go to Fund 200, right? I need to fill out a couple of more fields here just because it's required in my company's setup. All right, so that looks good. I'm going to go ahead and post it. Okay, so we see that the record was created successfully. And now when I go in to view an AP bill, so there it is. So we see now that it was posted to the AP side for fund or entity 201, right? So again, the customer was entity 100, but the vendor was 201, right? So this is how we're also able to automate this piece for you. And finally, I'll go into my comparison view by entities or funds dashboard. So from the top level, I can see a consolidated view of my funds or entities, along with the interentity transactions and due to due from balances. So due to Sage Intacct's multi-entity or multi-fund architecture, I can easily view my consolidated financial reports across my different funds. And to summarize, we can handle multiple entities and multiple funds, automate your interentity transactions, and you're also able to view consolidated financials from the top level with due to and due from balances. So I'd like you to think about, how much more time our system could save you and how much more efficient your team could be with Sage Intacct. So not only can we automate your interentity transactions, but we can also automate your transaction allocations. So I've already defined my transaction allocation definitions here. Transaction allocations will automatically do the allocation for you by percent, exact value, or fixed amount with over/under logic. So let's take a look at my funds definition. I've told the system to automatically split my 10 funds evenly by percentage. So you can see that I would like it to split evenly across the 10. We can also define more complex transaction allocations across multiple dimensions. So let's take a look at utilities, for example. So here we see how different percentages are defined across multiple dimensions: departments, funds, projects, restrictions, etc. So let's see how this works when you're entering an AP bill. So I'll create an AP bill. I'll choose my vendor. Let's go with ABC Office Supplies. I'll enter a simple amount like $100. And now you'll notice that I have an allocation column. So from here, this is where I can choose the defined allocation transaction definitions, which you just saw. So let's say I choose funds. Now, because it's using the information defined in my transaction allocation, you'll notice that the fund dimension is now grayed out. And if we take a look at the details, you'll notice that it has automatically split it according to your transaction allocation definition, so evenly across the 10 funds. Now let's take a look at the utilities example, which is more complex. Again, you'll see that the other dimensions are now grayed out. And if I go into the details, we can see how it has split the transaction according to the percentages and the dimensions I defined. Okay. Hope that's clear. So now let's take a look at my restrictions dimension. So let's talk a little bit about restrictions. So Sage Intacct allows you to track your permanently restricted, temporarily restricted, and unrestricted funds, and then report out on them. If you have purpose-based restrictions where you need to perform the release of restricted revenue based on expenditures being spent out of that revenue source, we can automate that piece for you. Let me just remove the email here. So Sage Intacct recognized that many not-for-profits must deal with this on an ongoing basis. So we've created a way to automate this for you through the General Ledger's Generate Restriction Release feature. This is one of the many examples of how we're listening to our not-for-profit customers' needs and constantly innovating with new features, which can help save time through automation. Purpose-based restriction releases are designed to pull the source amount for release automatically. They then create a revenue release journal entry of corresponding amounts. This style of release includes the setup of a release generation so that you can routinely generate releases without having to redefine the calculations every time. Purpose-based restriction release can be done at the top level or at the entity or fund level. Restriction release was designed to query for qualified expenses within a designated time frame to release an equivalent amount of revenue on the designated posting date. After qualified expenses have been entered for a period, you need to release the revenue from the restricted state. The restriction release feature enables you to generate a revenue release journal entry based on the criteria you've specified. So let's look at some of the options here. So I've defined, the posting date, the release journal, and the email address. So the entry is generated offline within a few moments, and then an email is sent once the entry is complete. And if journal approvals are enabled, you'll go through the steps to approve the release. We also need to define the revenue parameters and qualified expense. So we define the restriction dimension, the satisfaction of restriction account, any funding source dimension filter needed for a release. So in my example, it's the projects or grants dimension with the 402 Travis County contract. So then we define the dimension values for the entry. I have temporarily restricted and unrestricted. Then the expense period to evaluate your qualified expenses. So mine is set to the current month. the qualified expense group, so my expenditures, and your reporting book. You can also filter by funding source or location. So when you generate the release, Sage Intacct automatically gathers the qualified expenses for the period to determine the amount of restricted revenue to release with a journal entry. And releases can only be applied within the same entity or fund and will have equal credits and debits. So best practice is to generate the release one time at the end of the period. And if your organization uses our not-for-profit spend management application, you can configure it to stop any possible over-release by budgeting restricted revenue. So let's take a look at an example of automating purpose-based restriction release. So I've bookmarked the examples here, a great way to save pages which you go to frequently. All right. So on October 1st, 2021, the revenue was received as temporarily restricted, right, for the Fund 402, and which is our Travis County contract, in the amount of $50,000. So this was entered as a journal entry. Then on October 20th, 2021, so the money was spent in expenses. So you'll see here I'm in a bill. So the money was spent in expenses as unrestricted in the amount of $19,000. I don't know if that's difficult to see on your screen, but it's in the amount of $19,000. This was entered as a bill. So finally, we generate the restriction release to move the revenue from temporarily restricted to unrestricted at the end of the month on October 31st through the general ledger's generate restriction release feature. Sage Intacct automatically created the journal entry, which we can view in our release log. So I'll go in to view it here. Okay, so there is the 19,000 that it found in expenses and released the revenue from temporarily restricted to unrestricted according to our restriction release parameters. So to summarize, we can automate your purpose-based restriction release, ensuring that restricted funds are released efficiently. Sage Intacct offers an easy way to generate this release and click through history for entries created to see how releases have been derived and applied. So we have looked at traditional fund accounting, meaning independently balancing funds, interfund transactions, and showing our due from balances. Now, other organizations may simply define fund accounting as the ability to account for funds from a revenue, expense, and residuals perspective, more of a net asset tracking approach. Essentially, you're typically concerned with accurately tracking both the funds and the restriction designation of those funds. So any of Sage Intacct's standard dimensions can be used for this purpose, but most frequently we see the project dimension fulfilling this need. The project dimension includes the ability to have open-ended funds or to have time-bounded funds, which make them an ideal area to track funds. Additionally, some organizations use the project billing feature in the not-for-profit grants or projects module to produce invoices to funders. So tracking funds in this area allows for this to occur now or to be preserved as an option for future use. So my demo environment includes the not-for-profit projects or grants module, which you see here, which includes all of these features. But you don't require the entire module if you simply want to track funds as a dimension, which is why I won't be covering the full module today. I'll simply be explaining the dimension. However, some of the fields, you'll see on my screen, since I have the module, won't be relevant to the dimension since they're part of the module. So let me go into the projects or grants, and we'll take a look at this one here. So if you have the project dimension, we can track the fund ID. So we see here 401, right? We can track the name, of course, the start and end date, the fund manager, right? In the additional information tab, so you can track restrictions and time-bounded funds. So is the revenue restriction a purpose-based restriction, a time restriction, or is it open-ended? We can also track the restriction expiration years to indicate when to spend the received funds, the first restriction expiration date, and first restriction release. Then in your transactions, you can tag this dimension like your revenues, expenses, journal entries, and report out on the dimension accordingly. Speaking of reporting, let's end the webinar with compliance and reporting. So let's take a look at my compliance dashboard. I wanted to display a number of financial reports in different ways so that you can see the flexibility with our financial report writer. So starting at the top on the left-hand side, I have my statement of financial position or balance sheet divided into two columns. So year ending 2021 and year ending 2020. This is a standard out of the box report, right? On the right-hand side, I've added a few more details to the same report. So I have a column here to show the increase or decrease. And I've also added in a column for notations. So I'm often asked by not-for-profits if they can enter notations for audit purposes. And we can, of course, see the note or the explanation here for the increase. So we see that it says increase in payroll liabilities due to payroll accrual and timing at year end. Okay. And the other thing that I've also added to this report, so if we take a look at the accounts here as well as the rows, so my net assets, I've actually expanded by the restriction dimension. So I wanted to get more insight into restricted and unrestricted funds. So let's say I want more insight into temporarily restricted. So I can drill down into temporarily restricted. Let's say I want to take a look at the local grants. Again, I can drill down into the number. It takes me to the general ledger report, and then I can get to the journal entry. And there is the entry we saw earlier when the revenue was booked as temporarily restricted for $50,000. So again, being able to drill down from the top level into the individual entries. So you can see how I was able to expand here by the restriction dimension. Below the balance sheet, I have my statement of operations for revenues and expenditures over here on the left-hand side. So for this one, I have a column here for the budget, right, as well as the actuals for year ending 2021. And then I just wanted to see the actuals for 2020. To the right, I've taken my statement of operations and expanded it by funds. So now I'm able to see it across all of my funds with a total at the end for all funds in 2021, as well as a final column for 2020 year end. So not only can we expand the rows dimension, as you saw here with the restriction dimension, but we're also able to expand across the columns if we want to see my funds, right, broken out across the columns. And below, I've presented the same report across other dimensions. So again, here we can see the restrictions in the columns. So without restrictions and with restrictions, right? Those are my two columns here. And then I've also expanded here by departments, okay? So very easy to do depending on how you would like to display the information. If you wanted to see multiple dimensions in a single report, we can do that as well. And finally, at the bottom here, I have my statement of cash flows, both the indirect method as well as the direct method. So now that you've seen some examples, let's hop into reporting. So I'll edit one directly from the dashboard first, so you can see how we can edit directly from here. Let's take my statement of operations, revenue, and expenditures. If you have the user access to edit, you can click on the little pencil here, and it opens up our financial report writer. I will go into the financial report writer in detail, and we'll create a report to end the webinar. But just to show you how we can take an existing report, so the rows are already defined. I have all my account groups here. The columns are already defined, right? So if we remember for this one, I had my budget, my actual for 2021, and my actual for 2020. And what I'd like to do, I would simply like to take this actual 2021 column, and I want to expand it by the funds dimension. So I want to expand it by funds. I'm going to set that. That's it. Let's preview the report. Okay, now we see that same report. So there's the budget. We now see the actual for 2021 broken out by funds. There's a total for all funds year ending 2021, and there is 2020 at the end. So you can see how with just 2 clicks, I was able to expand that report by funds. Okay, so now let's go into the report center, and I'll show you how to create a report from scratch. All right, sorry, I think my internet is a little bit slow today. Sorry, give it 1 moment, it's just opening up. Okay, well, it looks good. So all reports can be accessed from the report center. This is the central hub. We have 150 out-of-the-box reports that you can run directly from here simply by clicking on them. You can also edit existing reports. So just as you saw earlier, if I wanted to simply make a change like expanding by a dimension, I can edit an existing report, so I don't need to create it from scratch, right? You can export to different formats. You can also schedule reports to go out. So perhaps you would like to email reports to specific people after closing the books. You can put it on a schedule and it'll happen automatically. So beyond the standard reports, you'll get a financial report writer to create your own reports. So the solution was created by accountants for accountants, and which makes it very easy to use. It really acts as a wizard and takes you through step-by-step how to create a report. So let's make one together. I need to give a name here to the report. So I'll put budget versus actual, and let's break it out by the department dimension. You can define your report type here, your report audience. So I've already determined, specific users within that audience. I can choose that here. And then because of our dimensions, we're able to report not just on viewing it by account, which you are typically used to for financial reports, right? But we can also display it by dimensions. So there are different ways to analyze the information. I'm going to leave it as accounts, but I am going to expand by dimension once I'm in the rows and columns. So now I'll hop into the rows. And it tells me to select my account groups. So I'm going to go ahead and choose my change in net assets and include it in the report. So this includes all of the accounts I need, my revenues and expenditures. So right now you'll notice that it's showing details. So if I want, I can hide the accounts, hide the drill down and simply show the summary. Or I can also, you see here with satisfaction of restrictions, for example, if I wanted to, I could expand by a dimension. So maybe I want to expand this one by my restrictions dimension. So you can really decide how you would like to view the information in your report. The next step is to go into the columns. So again, here you're just defining which columns you want to see in your report. I'm going to leave column 1 as is for the account name. In column 2, I do want to see the actuals, but I'm going to change it here to the current year to date. You do have a number of different reporting periods to choose from, as you can see here on my screen. And I just want to point out that you also have a number of different column types available. So if you want to look at, account attributes, computations, period variance, difference, budget, actual to budget difference, forecast, percentages, notations. So you have those different column types available to you. I'm going to leave this column as actual. And I want to expand this column by the department's dimension. So I'm going to set that. And I'm going to go ahead now and I want to add a budget column. So I can click here, add a column to the right. So now I'm going to go with budget. And I have multiple working budgets. So I'm going to choose my operating budget. And same thing here, I want it for the current year. And as well for this one, I want to expand it by the department dimension. Okay, now the final thing I want to look at is my budget to actual difference. So let's add in one more column. Of course, you can continue adding columns as you'd like, but I don't want to go too far over. So let's go with budget to actual difference. Okay, and same thing, I'm going to do it for the current year. And same thing here, I'm going to expand it by the department's dimension. Now, at the bottom here, I have some additional options. So let's say I wanted to do conditional highlighting, color scale, trend indicator, sparkline. Let's say I want to go with conditional highlighting, maybe less than 0. I want it to highlight in red. So I can go ahead and set that because I want to see where my actuals have gone over budget. Now you do have, other options available here in the financial report writer. So we have computations if you'd like to add any computations. We have filters. So if you wanted to filter for a specific fund or specific department, you can do that in here or any other dimension. The format. So lots of options here, how you want to display, negative numbers, rounding, currency symbols, right? So you have lots of different options here. Notations. So if you want to add any notations to your financial reports, you can do so here, as well as permissions. So here you can also determine who has access to this report. Is it everyone? Is it specific users? Who should be excluded from the list? And then the next steps. So the next step before saving it is that I want to now preview this report. So I'm going to go ahead and enter the date and I want to preview it. So let's see what it looks like before saving. So there it is. It's broken out by my different departments, right? We can see my actuals, my budget, and the difference. So let's take a look, at the expenditures piece. So I can see my actuals, which have gone over budget, right? They are highlighted here in red. So I do see the difference there between the actuals and the budget. So I hope you were able to see, how easy it is to build dynamic reports for your organization's needs. So that's the end of the demo today. I will go back to my PowerPoint slide. Give me one moment to get my mouse onto my other screen. Okay, so in summary, this is everything we covered today, right? We looked at dashboards, being able to slice and dice the data by dimensions, giving you greater visibility. We looked at drill down capability throughout the system and getting to the source and details from the top level. We looked at Sage Intacct's multi-entity or multi-fund architecture to manage multiple funds and consolidated financials across funds. You saw automation through inter-fund transactions with due to, due from amounts, transaction allocations, as well as automating purpose-based restriction release Finally, we looked at the option to manage multiple funds through the projects dimension, as well as compliance and reporting so that you can build dynamic reports. Thank you so much for attending the demo today. I'll pass it back to Mo.
Thank you, Maria. That was amazing. I think you just covered everything that we wanted to
Thank you.
cover.
Glad to hear that.
We tried to cover. I hope you can see my screen. So this was perhaps a glimpse of what we can offer in Sage Intacct for not-for-profit entities and the fund accounting and the compliance with it. If you want a specific demo for yourself, or you have situation, or you have requirements that are unique to your organization, please don't hesitate to give us a call. The number is there, our 800 number, which is 800-372-6174. You can reach us by email at sales@purlogicsolutions.com. You can go to our website where the recorded webinar will be there, and we should be able to answer your questions. Angela, I gotta ask, are there any questions for Maria or myself?
We do have one, Mo.
Sure.
It reads, if we have hundreds of grants, do we have to buy an entity for every grant?
I'll let Maria answer that.
Okay, thanks, Mo. So yeah, depending on if you're tracking them, again, as I explained, the funds, either we can set it up through the multi-entity or multi-fund, which has unlimited funds, or we can track it simply through projects, again, unlimited on that side.
Thank you. I hope this answered the questions. If there is any other questions, you can email it to us, reach out to us, and we'll be able to answer that very quickly. If there are no other questions, we'd like to give you back your 5 minutes. Thank you for attending today's webinar, whether you attended it in real time or you're watching it in recording. Please, as I said, don't hesitate to contact us if you have further questions. Please watch our first one, which covered the general part of it, and have a great day. Thank you very much. Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you.